and welcome to the 295th episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have a really packed show for you today. We're going to be talking about the news that Project Chip is going for the commercial market, not just the smart home. We've got a tiny ML model for the edge from the researchers at MIT. We also have some ARM news related to machine learning processors we'll talk about, and the IoT Security Act has passed the Senate, which means it's going to go to the president to sign. We'll talk about what that is and what it means. AirThings is making its air sensors a lot smarter. Wise has a new product. We've got some more LoRaWAN asset tracking platforms. And we've got some news from the wearables and medical device market. Plus, we've got some Wi-Fi reviews and news. The review is the Eero 6 router, and the news is from Plume. And finally, we took a sneak peek at the HomePod Mini. We're going to talk more about that next week, but we'll tell you quick first impressions, like 5-minute first impressions. We're also going to hear from our sponsor, Calyx. And our guest this week is Katja Obratska, who is a professor in the Department of Computer Science and Electrical Engineering at UC Santa Cruz. Katja is building out a sensor network for fire monitoring, for monitoring wildfires. And she's going to talk about digital twins, managing power consumption, and using drones as like mobile access points during a fire. It's very interesting, so stay tuned for all of that. But now, let's hear from another one of our sponsors. This week's sponsor is TerraCode. Get your IoT project off the ground and take it to the next level with TerraCode. TerraCode helped a major medical device manufacturer connect their devices and figure out when they needed servicing a week ahead of time with close to 100% accuracy. It's also helped an energy company connect its fleet of equipment to predict service calls. You can learn more and get a free IoT audit at terracode.com. That's TERA code.com. Okay, Kevin, let's get started with the news from Project Chip. Everybody, you might remember Project Chip as the standard launched last year with big names, including Google, Apple, Amazon, and Samsung. And this was basically going to be a one ring for the smart home interoperability. Except we don't actually know what it's going to do yet because they haven't told us. So last December, they said, hey, we're all getting together to build this standard for interoperability in the smart home. It's going to be at the application layer. It's going to work over Zigbee, Bluetooth, Thread. And so we're all like, ooh, neat. Tell us more. And they were like, nope, not yet. And we're still waiting for that. But today, which is Wednesday, they did say that Chip is also going to be going commercial. They have launched a working group within the organization that will focus on deploying Chip in commercial buildings, apartment buildings, other public spaces. And this is no surprise, but it is cool. And the two things I'm thinking of when I heard this was, actually, there are three things. Thing one was, why the heck can't you tell us more about where the whole standard effort is? Thank you. But two was, okay, this makes sense. And it might mean that my home devices, when I bring them into work or other public places, maybe it will remember my preferences or routines and start bringing that into other places I go, which would be super cool. And then three is, how long can we really keep this project under the Zigbee Alliance? Because Chip is something that has the potential to become a real household name, like Wi-Fi is a household name, or Bluetooth, right? And you don't put something like that under the Zigbee Alliance. The Zigbee Alliance is either going to have to spin out Chip or it's going to have to rename itself for Chip, which may not even be the final name because Project Chip is kind of like not an awesome name. Those are all my thoughts.
I would think it gets a different name as well because Chip or Project Chip isn't going to cut it in the consumer space in particular. But they're talking today about commercial. I'm a little surprised, and maybe you are not, so I'll just throw this out there and then get a reaction. There's not one mention of this as smart buildings. It's all commercial, commercial, commercial. Why do you think that is? Is it just because smart buildings doesn't mean anything to a lot of people yet?
I think smart buildings can encompass so many things. I don't think it really matters much. I think smart buildings, it makes you think of offices, whereas commercial could be warehouses, it could be apartments, it could be anything. And I guess maybe smart buildings just a little too generic. I don't know.
No, could be. It's just something that jumped out at me in the press release.
There are some things that would be different for commercial than would be for smart home. So think about like how to provision a device and get it online. Doing that in the home where you have like one admin makes sense. When you have multiple admins spread across, different systems or different buildings, I think you're going to have to take a slightly different tack there. But we'll see. Yeah. So I'm really excited. I would be even more excited if we got the full standard. As a reminder, you can find the current efforts of Project Chip on GitHub. So, it's out there. There are things. It's just proceeding along.
They said by the end of this year was the goal.
They did. And they said they would have products out by 2021. And I want y'all to remember that because later in the show, that's going to be important. Woohoo! I'm teasing. Okay. I mean, I'm not teasing. I'm what is it called? I'm foreshadowing. I just ruined that totally. Okay. Let's talk about machine learning. Let's move on. MIT, they're so smart there. They have launched a machine learning model for tiny microcontrollers. And if you've been listening to the show, I've been super psyched about TinyML forever. People even used to make fun of me. But these researchers at MIT have created MCU-Net. It's a neural network for small processors that run at the edge. So MCUs are, I don't want to call them dumb. They can be quite powerful, actually, but they're the processors that are inside sensors, a lot of appliances, that sort of thing. And what these researchers have done is they've done a way to take inference, not the learning, but just the execution of a model onto an MCU. And they're calling one component Tiny Engine. That's the inference engine that does the resource management on the chip. And then they run TinyNAS, a neural architecture search algorithm. And that is going to help Tiny Engine run a particular neural network structure. We're going to put a link to this in here. But basically, what we're doing here, this is just an ongoing effort to help manage resources, memory resources, and compute resources in constrained devices to do some sort of machine learning, to run machine learning models. And we're already seeing this in, our smart speakers and that sort of thing, but those are plugged into the wall. Imagine something on battery power being able to do this. And that is when it gets really cool.
The impressive bits, just to put it in context, they say that the size of their binary code for Tiny Engine is between 1.9 and 5 times smaller than comparable inference engines from Google and ARM.
Wow.
And to beat out Google in this space really is impressive to me.
Do they have a tiny TPU? A tiny TPU? Tiny TPU. They do. They actually have tiny TensorFlow or something.
Yeah. I want to say Coral, but I could be wrong on that.
That's what it... Of course, Google's Tiny is not like embedded Tiny. That is something to think about. And speaking of ARM, oh my gosh, they're actually bringing in 2 new processor cores for their flexible access program. And they're both related to machine learning. And I would say machine learning at the edge too. So flexible access program is ARM's program that lets startups have free access to ARM's chip design IP. And the news this week is that they are going to make their first neural processing unit, the Ethos U55, and the Cortex M55 microcontroller available under that program. And so that means you can actually get access to those designs, one of which is, like I said, a neural processing unit dedicated for any sort of machine learning. And then the Cortex M55 is a MCU plus neural processing unit, basically, that is designed for machine learning. So now you can take that and design your own silicon without paying the huge licensing fees. And then only when you start to produce it are you going to be charged. So that's pretty cool. This
is huge for startups. I mean, it's not, the program is not new, but the expansion of additional chipset architectures and so on is new. And I love what they're doing because it used to be impossible to be a startup and be able to afford access to the IP here.
Yeah. And in my world, this is great because it's just another example of Tiny ML. I'm going to start singing songs. Okay.
Oh my.
Yeah.
I guess I shouldn't mention then in the same press release, they mentioned the Renesas microcontroller that uses Google's Tiny ML.
You can. And that's what it's called. See, now we know.
TensorFlow Lite.
TensorFlow Lite. There it is.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. Half the calories.
Let's move to the legal sphere, namely Congress. The Senate and House have both signed off on the IoT Cybersecurity Improvement Act of 2020, which means it only needs to be signed by the president. Presumably, it will be signed. It's not a super controversial thing. We've talked about this bill before. This was, I think, the third time they tried to get it through. So, yay. This will ensure that federal devices, so connected devices purchased by the federal government, will work and be deemed secure under some NIST standards. And I have my issues with this. One, there are lots of devices that are not ever going to go through the federal procurement process, and this does nothing to help that. However, it is good that we're thinking about this now. And the bill really abrogates a lot of responsibility to NIST in terms of deciding what standards need to be out there. But NIST is up for the job. And it also requires Homeland Security to review and revisit the legislation every 5 years and revise it as necessary to keep up with the latest in tech. I mean, 5 years is, it's an eternity in tech, and it's nothing when we start talking about legislation. But it's a compromise, which is what these are.
It's progress.
There we go. So hopefully we'll see that signed into law, and then it'll start affecting the world as we know it. All righty. Also in commercial news, AirThings, they make a air quality monitor that I use in my home. And we've talked about it a couple times. They have a monitor for business. They've added something called the Virus Risk Indicator. And what this is an algorithm that's going to track a bunch of elements inside an office building. So CO2, humidity, temperature, and airborne pollutants that is going to calculate whether the likely risk of an airborne virus will spread in any indoor space. So this is not, hey, there is a virus. This is saying, hey, the conditions in this building are really awesome for spreading a virus. They did something similar on the consumer side with a mold risk indicator, where they take humidity and temperature in a space and they look at that and they're like, your risk of mold is somewhere on the scale between 0 and 10. And I think it's really interesting. This is also going to have a risk score of between 1 and 10. And there'll also be some insights around that. But as people are trying to get people back into work and we understand that ventilation and airborne spread is key here, I'm really excited. Although I do want to see, eventually peer-reviewed studies that talk about this. But in the midst of a pandemic, it's kind of like, do you buy it hoping it's not snake oil? I mean, I just...
That's a tough call. I mean, I know you love your AirThings, and for good reason. I personally wish that this would come out to the consumer devices too, but it's so focused on business for good reason. I get that, but I think it would be nice to have. Actually, if they made it available and there was some peer research, I probably would buy an AirThings for my house.
Yeah, but peer research, that takes time. So we're not going to get that anytime soon, sadly.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about, other gadgets. Wise. Good Lord.
When will they stop putting out new devices this year? Jeez.
I mean, we've had headphones, a thermostat, a door lock.
Indoor-outdoor camera.
Indoor-outdoor camera.
A robot, vacuum robot.
Vacuum robot, new camera.
Coming in January.
And now the Wise sprinkler controller. The Wise sprinkler controller is an 8-zone Wi-Fi sprinkler controller. You're going to get 3 years of automatic weather-based watering if you sign up for the first subscription plan, Sprinkler Plus.
It's not expensive, though.
No, it's not. No, Wise does not go for expensive. In the basic controller, you're going to get a fixed schedule, and it will be compatible with other sensors.
You get sunrise and sunset settings also.
Yes, sunrise, sunset, notifications, and control via app. When you move to Sprinkler Plus, you get weather-based smart schedules. Now, I will say this. As a person who's installed and used weather to track sprinkler and watering, this really depends on where you live and where the weather is coming from, because the closest weather station might be a mile away, but the weather may be very different, especially things like rain. That was the case in Texas. It's probably less the case now where I live in the Pacific Northwest, because it's just continual low-grade rain, but that's something to be aware of. So hopefully maybe we'll see Wise add in soil sensors. They say they will work with some soil sensors, but we're not sure. And the idea here is the soil sensor can tell you what it is now, but it won't tell you if it's going to rain tomorrow. And so then maybe it's worth waiting. And that's what the Sprinkler Plus will do.
And the Sprinkler Plus is only $10 a year. That's why we're saying it's not that expensive. It's well worth it if it works. They're promising hyper-local weather data.
Yeah, hyper-local can be, even a mile apart, it's different. Hyper-local, what does that mean? Does that mean like...
Oh, well, if you're familiar with Dark Sky, which Apple bought earlier this year, took it away from me on Android, I should mention. Hyperlocal is basically crowdsourcing all of the app user data so that it knows, it's going to rain where you are in 6 minutes based on where the rain is now, where you are, and what people have reported or what their apps are seeing. So it's not a mile away. It's like, I don't want to say like it's 10 feet away, but it's where you are.
Okay. And the Wise Sprinkler, by the way, I don't know if I said this, it's $49.99. So take that, ratio. So there we go. You can pre-order it. I don't know when it's going to be delivered.
It ships in January is what they're saying.
Okay, that and the vacuum.
Get yourself a water sprinkler and a vacuum come January.
Okay, so yes, January lawn watering. Let's go into some more news. LoRaWAN. We have more LoRaWAN news. Here and Actility are launching an IoT tracking program. Kevin?
Yeah, if you're not familiar with Here, a former Nokia unit that was sold off.
Maps!
I think it went to... I'm sorry?
Maps!
Yes, that's right. Here Maps. Yeah, it was on my Windows phone back in the day. I think it's the car companies ended up buying that. But it's basic news that Here Technologies is using LoRaWAN with Actility for tracking. What I took away from just this general news is that we're seeing more and more low-power WAN being used for asset tracking, to me, than NB-IoT and other cellular type bits. And I'm wondering, is that a trend?
Yes, that is all I can say. Yes, I do think.
Okay.
I do think it is, and we're seeing an expansion of LoRaWAN networks, and hopefully, we'll actually be able to use things like distribution for the vaccines, for example, to really drive adoption. Because one of the challenges with LoRaWAN is there hasn't been the network coverage, so people didn't want to build devices, and we're seeing now the network coverage improve, and also the need for it rise. So I'm actually very optimistic about this, or LoRaWAN in general, because NB-IoT is so expensive and it's battery intensive, and Bluetooth will work people are using it in like a warehouse setting, but no.
No, it's, once you walk outside and away, that's it. Or you drive away with a pallet load of virus, pandemic.
Vaccine. Vaccine is what,
vaccine
is the word you're looking for.
Don't drive out with the virus,
Please
drive
don't
out with the vaccine. Yes.
All right. And now let's go for some quick news bits. Los Angeles police just banned the use of commercial facial recognition. Any thoughts on that? Joining other cities in the U.S.
We talked about this. Portland, Maine, a week or two ago did this, and now
Portland, Oregon did too.
Oh, did they?
Oh, not they didn't do it from. They just used it. They did it. They banned it from any public agency using commercial facial recognition.
Okay, well, but this is a big one because this is in Los Angeles, and they're the third largest police department. Apparently, they were using Clearview AI, and we've talked about that many times in the past, but no longer. That's it. Banned, which is very good, I think.
Yeah. All right. We've got some news from digital stethoscope maker Echo, which has raised $65 million to develop home telehealth offerings. Echo has made it's a connected stethoscope. It's really just a device that you stick on someone's chest, and it tracks their heart rate. And it's very smart. It's been in the market for a while. It's approved by the FDA. So what it does heart sounds and electrocardiogram readings, and it has FDA clearance that on its algorithms that spot heart murmurs and atrial fibrillation. AFib, y'all. By the way, I actually signed up for a study with Fitbit to track my heart rate for AFib, and I just got the results back, and they were like, nothing for you. So, yay.
Well, that's good.
Yay. But the point here is they are going to pop this. They're actually working with 3M, which makes a actual stethoscope, like a physical thing that we're thinking of. And they're going to add some digital smarts to that. And they're basically just really trying to build out the tools and algorithms for medical quality home health. So go them.
I just wish the data was more easily portable.
That should happen. We should get something on electronic patient records soon, I hope. Good Lord.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, I'm not excited about this. What about you? Google Fit?
Well, yes and no. It's funny because you just mentioned Fitbit, which we know Google is
in talks or trying to get to.
Right. So in my opinion, Google Fit, just from my personal experience, has been one of the worst health tracking apps and exercise tracking apps ever. It needed an update, and it looks like it got it. Now, I don't know if the algorithms are any better than before, but it's much prettier. In fact, it looks more like Fitbit, not an exact clone by any means. But now you can see more information from your tracked workouts. You can see maps. It's just clearer information. And that's important because if you can't read your health information, your exercise information, you can't intuit anything from that. So that's a good thing. They've also added some new sleep tracking tools right into Fit, but you need a connected device or an app that actually works with it, obviously. But that's new. So again, very Fitbit-like in terms of what they're trying to add here.
Cool. Yeah, I'm not.
You're over.
I'm over it. I'm thinking I've been shopping. I've got the Halo on. I just posted a review of the Whoop, which went back or is going back rather, because I can't. It doesn't offer me value for what I do for $30 a month because that's a lot.
Right. Right.
But I do think here's Stacy's free M&A advice. I think a company like maybe not Peloton, but Mirror, one of those expensive high-end kind of home fitness services. Mm-hmm. Combine that with Whoop and you have like a baller package because you would have the coaching in terms of telling you what to do and then the coaching from Whoop that tells you how hard you can do it, right? Which is what
you got
an ascent. I mean, that's why you would have
that's what you need,
physical trainer.
Both pieces of the puzzle there. Absolutely.
So that's just me. Throwing that out there. Anybody in charge of any of those organizations, take it and run with it. Other tiny news bits. Plume, the company that makes the little Plume pods that they offer Wi-Fi. It's basically Wi-Fi as a service, though. They've really optimized it so the network adapts. It's a cloud-based service that tracks what you have in your house, what it needs from a Wi-Fi perspective, and is constantly trying to rejigger your network to make it perform optimally. That's the short thing. Comcast actually sells them as part of their Xfinity Wi-Fi. The software is embedded in the Samsung Wi-Fi gear. And Plume is now calling its Wi-Fi service HomePass. And I'm noting this primarily because this is another shift, that it's a subtle shift, but it's happening, to services and subscriptions. So now, yes, you need the physical hardware or you need the Samsung hardware, but the company's still Plume, but HomePass is now the Wi-Fi service. And it's not like, I'm going to go buy a router. It's like, oh, I'm going to subscribe to Wi-Fi. So it's kind of like paying your broadband bill, except you have the physical hardware in your house. Anyway, the value adds around this are significant, but I'm also very concerned that everything is a subscription now. Mm-hmm. So let's move on to talk about other Wi-Fi news, because Kevin, you have a review of the Eero 6 Pros.
I do. I have 3 of them. So one acts as the main router, and then the other 2 are building out the mesh network. And it's so funny you just mentioned subscriptions, because one piece of the puzzle here is you can add the Eero Secure and Secure Plus subscriptions, but we'll get to that in a minute. The product itself, in my testing and my usage, has been fantastic compared to the routers that I've used. I've had the Google Wi-Fi mesh network. I've had the Samsung SmartThings Wi-Fi mesh network as well. This blows the doors off those in terms of speed. I can't compare them to any other routers because I don't have any other routers. Part of that may be because this does support the new Wi-Fi 6 standard, which is something we say if you're going to upgrade your router at this time, definitely consider getting Wi-Fi 6 support. Don't rush out to buy Wi-Fi 6 routers just because you want it. I would wait until you need it, because there aren't too many devices that actually use Wi-Fi 6. However, even on my Wi-Fi 5 devices, I'm seeing much faster speeds, easily 25% faster. Coverage seems to be about the same for me. I did test a Wi-Fi 6 device, the new iPhone 12, which my wife got last week, and those speeds were at least 20 to 30% faster than on my other mobile devices. So there's definitely something to be said to have the Wi-Fi 6.
Wow. But
yes. But Well, first of all, it's expensive. This 3-pack is $600, and that's discounted because if you buy just a single one, which you can do, that is $229, I believe. It's not cheap. It's not cheap. Let me double check that. Yeah, $229. So $600 for a 3-pack. You're getting those good speeds, which is great, and you're getting up to 6,000 square foot of coverage, also great. I love that these have 2 gigabit Ethernet ports on the back of each unit. That's great. But I think for some of the advanced features, you really have to have that subscription plan, which is either $3 a month or $10 a month, depending on what it is you get. And this is the Eero Secure plan. So for $3 a month, you get what they call advanced security, safe filtering, ad blocking, an activity center to show you how the devices use your network, and if you want, like a weekly update to get insights onto the network usage.
That's what I have.
Okay. And, I've tested all these things. It says it protected me from X thousand number of ads. That's great. I can see how much data each device has used. I can't really see much else, which maybe I'm spoiled by the firewall where I can see exactly where the data is going, what server, what IP address and all that. Not everybody needs that. I get it. The advanced security, it quote unquote protects all your devices from threats. I haven't seen any threats. It hasn't reported any threats. I don't really know what it's doing, if anything. And I'm saying that from a smart device standpoint, because that's kind of where my mind is with that. So, if you have Eero and you have this, have you seen any threats being detected?
It has detected something on my daughter's MacBook, and it quarantined it off the network. It sent me a notification. Did it quarantine or just send me a network? I can't remember.
Either way, that's good. At least notifies you specifically.
Yes.
Short of having somebody try and hack my house network, I couldn't create a threat. So maybe I would feel better if I had seen something. And
everyone, Kevin has now volunteered his home for hackers. Go forth, test his network.
Yes. So the Eero Secure for $10 a month, the Secure Plus for $10 a month, it adds 3 things. It adds the license for 1Password, which is a great password manager. It includes a VPN through encrypt.me, and it includes antivirus software for Mac and Windows from Malwarebytes. That's what you're paying $7 extra a month for, and I don't think that's worth it personally. There are open source free password managers out there. I use a different VPN because it's in Switzerland, and I completely trust it. I don't know anything about encrypt.me. And as far as antivirus, I think people using Microsoft Windows Defender or generally just using a Mac are probably okay. So I'm not sure it's worth the $10 a month for that personally.
I think the target market might disagree because it's nice to be like, for $7, I don't have to think about these 3 big security issues, and I don't have to research it on my own because I can trust Eero, which we should mention is owned by Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thinking there. But I'm with you. I already have my own subscription.
I don't disagree with you. I think for a mainstream consumer that wants it all taken care of for them, it is a good package, right? They don't want to deal with all that. But I think the pricing of the hardware itself might put them out of this.
Well, yeah, it is expensive. Although
it is expensive.
If I could do 2 for...
True, you could.
If, I don't know if this math works, but if 3 covers 6,000 square feet, I have a 2,700 square foot home, so I could do 2 and should be fine, yeah?
Yes. Or, and this is, I did not review this, but what I would suggest is looking into not the Pro version that I tested, but just the Eero 6. And that covers a 3-pack. It's $279. That's almost as much as 1. So if you get the 3-pack, it covers up to 5,000 square foot, not 6,000. It's $279. You can still get the Eero Secure packages if you want. There is a key difference. It does have Wi-Fi 6, but the speeds of the connection between the access points is slower, and it's basically rated up to 500 megabits per second on client devices, whereas the other one is rated up to a gigabit per second. So if you don't have internet speeds at home broadband over 500 megabits per second, I probably would just get not the Pro one, we'll call it the amateur one.
Got it. Okay, now I know. All right, very fast, because we've been talking forever, Kevin. Let's get your quick take on the HomePod Mini, which is $99. You just got yours. I'm about to test it out So next week, we'll have a full review. $99. And it has Thread, which we're excited about because we think that's going to tie back into Project Connected Home over IP or Project Chip. And what do you think? Your rapid unboxing.
It was a rapid unboxing right before we started recording. I listened to 3 or 4 songs. I did ask Siri a question or two. I think I expected more. And this is just the first impression. The sound was good. It didn't seem quite as loud or room filling as I had expected. But then again, I've had larger speakers in my house, so maybe I'm kind of jaded by that. So I'm going to say it sounds good. Obviously, it works with HomeKit. And I'm more curious to hear the full review from you because you have another $99 speaker with the Google Nest Audio. So I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Yes. I will be comparing it across all of the $99 smart speakers that are now on the market. And I'll also be looking at the home control and Thread stuff. So, woo. Okay. Let's keep going for the Internet of Things podcast hotline. This week, the podcast hotline is brought to you by Very. Very is a fully distributed IoT engineering firm helping you get your biggest projects fully operational, on time, and on budget. You should discover what Very's multidisciplinary teams can do at www.verypossible.com. This week on the hotline, before we go to the question, I should also tell you that you should call us and ask us your questions, and you will be entered to win this month's prize, which is an August Wi-Fi Smart Lock. Woo! It was a review unit that they did not take back for some reason. So I'm now sending it out to y'all because I don't keep those things. And if you want to enter to win this, just call us at 512-623-7424 and you will be entered to win. All right, this week's question comes from the cold north, Saskatchewan. It is from Gareth. Let's hear it.
Hey, Stacey and Kevin. Gareth Jones from Saskatchewan here. I have a Z-Wave setup using a Vera hub and about 30 devices. Recently, a couple of the switches have gone bad, and I'm going to have to replace them. I have Google Home devices through the voice control, but I'm wondering if I should replace the Z-Wave switches with a different technology. Love the show. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Gareth. Remember way earlier in the show when I said, hey, Project Chip things are coming out in 2021, and this is going to be important later? This is that moment. This is what I was foreshadowing. I do think you should probably get rid of your switches. There are some Vera lovers who listen to this show, and I know y'all are out there because y'all email me asking me why I don't talk more about Vera. And the reason has always been that it didn't tie easily into all of the other smart home things that were happening. It felt much more like an old school, like X10 type of control system. I didn't ignore it. I did pay attention to it, but that is the reason. And I don't think Z-Wave is going away, but if I had the chance to pop new switches in the wall, I would just go Lutron because that's just me. But
I knew you were going to say that.
I can't not plug it. It just works so well and across all the platforms.
It does. It does.
But let's say you don't want to do that, which is a reasonable thing. If you can hold out for like early next year, I think we're going to see some chip-based switches. If you can't hold out, I would get the newest version of light switch that works with Zigbee, not Z-Wave, because I think some of those should be future compatible with chip. We hope. And that's just my guess. If they're broken now and you're like, I cannot live another day, I think you should do Lutron. And it's going to be expensive. Kevin?
So you wouldn't go with a Wi-Fi switches?
Yeah.
I see such little risk in doing that. That's why I suggest it. It doesn't matter in a sense what happens in 2021. Wi-Fi switches are going to work. And they're pretty compatible with anything. So,
all right, fine. Yeah, do some Wi-Fi.
You just like your Lutron.
I do. They're so easy to set up with Wi-Fi switches. You've got to like create the account. Now, if you're doing it across 30 switches, then, that is a lot of switches. And if they're all from the same vendor, then you don't have to worry so much about managing it and that being complicated. So sure, do Wi-Fi if you're desperate and you need to do it now. I can't say that. Kevin would do Wi-Fi. I would do Lutron.
I probably would. I probably would do Wi-Fi. I mean, there are Wi-Fi switches that just work with, some of the smart home or smart speakers that are out there today. Google, for example.
I've tried the Wemo ones. I've tried the TP-Link ones. Have I tried the iDevices ones? they're just so, they have these LEDs on them and they light up. And when they go down, they like flash in the middle of the night. They don't work like a light switch. That's my complaint. But yes, Gareth, we're not answering it but we're trying to give you the state of the world and market, as it were. I don't think you would hate yourself if you did Wi-Fi. I know you wouldn't hate yourself if you did Lutron.
And exactly. I was going to say, Lutron is great. It's just going to cost you more. It's a bigger investment.
Yeah, it's like $45 per light switch than the hub. And, maybe you can buy, Home Depot, I've bought some in bulk from Home Depot, but it's still an investment. So
it is.
You can ask for that for the holidays, I guess. All right. That concludes this portion of the show. Remember, if you would like to call to enter to win the August lock, give us a call at 512-623-7424, and maybe we'll answer your question on the show, and for sure, you will be entered to win. Stay tuned for a message from our sponsor, Calyx, and our guest, Katja Obradska, who is going to be talking to us about building a resilient, low-cost sensor network for detecting wildfires. It's important, and there's a lot of parallels, actually, between that and like ruggedized industrial environments. Maybe you'll learn something. And now, a word from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Calyx. Hey everyone, we're taking a quick break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Calyx, and I have Pam Ferguson here from the company. So Pam, can you start with telling me a little bit about Calyx?
Absolutely. Calyx is 100% focused on enabling service providers of all sizes to deliver amazing experiences in the home. We provide cloud software, systems, and services to communication service providers. In turn, those customers deliver future-proofed and autonomous fiber networks. Great to be chatting with you again today about the Revenue Edge. Your listeners can find out more about it at calyx.com/revenueedge.
All right, Pam, you've told me a few times that Calyx sees communication service providers as critical to the home network experience for their subscribers. Can you expand on how and why?
Subscribers are quick to assume their service provider is to blame if something goes sideways in their home network. At Calyx, we're focused on making it very easy for CSPs to be front and center to their subscribers, delivering amazing home experiences. These experiences go above and beyond access to Wi-Fi 6 whole home managed Wi-Fi and applications like home network security and parental controls. It's pretty cool to see our customers' success in doing all of this. Take Jade Communications in Colorado or Silver Star in Wyoming. They're really embracing their role and responsibility. They're doing everything from mandating a Calyx system in the home through delivering a personalized version of our subscriber-facing app, through to adding parental controls and network security. Their subscriber response is fantastic. Their adoption rates are upward of 75%.
On that note, with everyone working, schooling, and doing everything from home, can you share more on how Calyx is helping communication service providers deliver cool new experiences to help their subscribers during these unusual times?
Interestingly, we've just enhanced our parental controls offering called Experience IQ. It's a mobile app that now includes something called My Priorities. CSPs can enable their subscribers with controls in the home, controls around who and what is prioritized in the home network. You're probably hearing lots of similar stories, parents with multiple kids at home trying to work, learn, play harmoniously. I don't see this work from anywhere trend disappearing too quickly. Experience IQ is really making it all much easier for everyone. And of course, not everyone is blessed with a gig service. So it's on service providers to help subscribers ensure that the devices and applications that are critical to them to accomplish what they need to with the tools to make it easy, like prioritizing mom's laptop for a work-related Zoom call, is just another example of how service providers can respond to subscriber needs.
Thanks, Pam. Can you remind people where to go to find out more information about Calyx?
Thanks, Stacy. If you are with a service provider, you can go to calyx.com/revenueedge. If you're an end consumer and want to learn more about our awesome Blast Wi-Fi 6 systems, you can check out blastwifi.com, a site we created to help consumers understand our offerings and direct them to one of our nearby service provider customers.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Katja Obradska, who is a professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at UC Santa Cruz. Hello, Katja. How are you doing today?
Hi, everyone. I'm fine. Excited to be here and talking about our project.
Yes, we are excited to have you, and it's a really relevant project. So, as I told people leading into this interview, we're going to be talking about using the Internet of Things to detect forest fires. And this is a big deal because we just came off of a really crazy, intense fire season. And I also think this is going to have applicability because there are lots of people who listen to the show in the industrial world who are trying to get information from really harsh environments. And so I think there's going to be some parallels that we can discover here. So let's just get started with, this is your research. What exactly are you trying to do around sensor deployments to detect forest fires?
This project is an Internet of Things solution to wildfire monitoring and prediction to help collect in situ, meaning on the ground information from sensors that would be installed in these areas that are, areas, for example, that are prone to wildfires. And of course, we are collaborating with CAL FIRE. They're helping us, for example, identify the right sensors to use and also the right places to deploy. But it's basically a network of sensors that would be installed in these areas and would be collecting information 24/7 and then running analytics that will try to assimilate this information and inform fire models that are now available and that use, for example, remote sensing information, but this information is going to complement the remote sensing information and hopefully make these models more accurate so that these conditions can be detected ahead of time and hopefully prevent devastating events. So the idea is to deploy very low cost, low power, small form factor sensing devices in the ground that will measure things like temperature, humidity, soil moisture, wind, etc., and get this information out of the ground to the internet so that it can be viewed by first responders and also inform these models that are already available.
Okay, so to be clear, this is kind of dual purpose. You're going to have these small form factor, low power, hopefully relatively cheap sensors in the ground measuring conditions in hopes of both predicting wildfires, so maybe helping assess danger levels before they happen, but then also once a wildfire is in the process of happening, you're also going to use the data from the ground in front of it to predict how it might spread. Is that a good assessment?
Exactly, yes. And hopefully prevent it from becoming, as devastating as they have been, because then we will detect them early enough.
Okay, this is tough. It's tough both from the prediction standpoint and it's tough from like, hey, there's about to be a fire and all your sensors are going to go up in smoke. Let's start with the physical engineering challenge, like just getting sensors, finding the right ones and putting them in the ground. Let's talk about what's difficult there and how y'all are kind of addressing that.
Yeah, so we are collaborating with CAL FIRE so that they can inform us on things like, what kind of sensors they think are the most appropriate, the range that they want to see sensed by these sensors. So we are using that information to select the sensors that we are using, but the system is composed of, both these sensors as well as computing devices that will collect this information from the sensors and then communicate them through the network. So what we are doing is that we have these, what we called a hierarchical deployment style, where we have what we call sensor nodes, which are nodes that basically have the sensors attached to them. And then, these nodes are collecting information from the sensors themselves. And then we have a central node, so to speak, which we call the cluster head, which then collects information from the sensor nodes. And then we have a collection of these clusters, which consist of sensor nodes and a cluster head, right? And then the cluster head collects information from its sensor nodes and then collectively forwarding this information across the network so that it will reach the internet at some point. So there will be, say, a data collection site in the cloud somewhere that will be collecting this information that is percolating through the network using these cluster heads. So the cluster heads are basically relay nodes that relay the information that is being sensed by the sensor nodes.
We're getting into the architecture, like not just of the physical stuff on the ground, but the actual computing architecture. So I love that you're taking us there. Let's lay the actual groundwork for that and talk about the kind of connectivity you're using and how you're architecting the information flow from your sensors, maybe to a gateway, maybe to the cloud. I don't know how you're handling this. So let's kind of talk about how that's being handled.
The motivation to use this sort of, what I call the hierarchical deployment to target low power and, of course, low cost. So these sensor devices that are talking to their cluster head, so you can see this as a star topology between the cluster head and its sensor nodes. And then the sensor nodes are talking to the cluster head, and they have a duty cycle type operation that allows them to also be power efficient. So they're not on all the time. So they wake up, send, and then they send the information to the cluster head, which then in turn aggregates this information and then sends it through the network. And then the other reason for using this hierarchical deployment style is modularity and resilience, because we can deploy these clusters in an incremental way, so to speak, so that you can provide better coverage of the area that is now being covered, as well as expand the coverage to other areas in a very, seamless way. That way, you can increase, for example, your spatial granularity of coverage in the current area by adding more clusters. Also, for example, if a cluster head fails for some reason, then, its sensors can attach themselves, so to speak, to a neighbor cluster heads. And that way, the network also becomes more resilient to failures.
This isn't a Wi-Fi mesh network, though. You're kind of creating an ad hoc mesh. How does that work?
Yeah, so this is an ad hoc mesh network. So you can think of it as a peer-to-peer network that does not rely necessarily on any infrastructure by, for example, communication or network providers, right? So the network is self-sufficient in terms of communication needs because the cluster heads act as an access point, so to speak. So right now, we are using, or at least our current prototype is using Wi-Fi, but in ad hoc mode to communicate with the cluster head. And the cluster heads also use Wi-Fi to communicate amongst them. This is, what we're using currently. We have looked at other technologies like, for example, LoRa. But the problem with LoRa for the cluster head would be that we are also planning to use a camera. And the camera would require higher bandwidth, and LoRa is not going to be able to withstand that.
One of the challenges of doing something like this, in addition to all the other challenges, is that, there's not like a Wi-Fi network in most national forests or where you probably wanted to deploy these sensors. Let's talk about your connectivity strategies around backhaul to the internet.
Yeah, so that is a very good question. And what we are hoping is that, we will be able to deploy the network so that we will bring it, so to speak, close to some existing internet, like, for example, maybe a cell tower somewhere. So that's why it's important to have this modular type of design that you can incrementally deploy as you need to deploy so that you can get the data, not just cover the area, but also get the data out of the network. We are also collaborating with scientists at UC Berkeley and also planning to use UAVs to help not just with the data collection itself, but also with the connectivity of the network that, these UAVs or drones can be used to, literally speaking, right, take the data out of the network and deposit it where there is internet connectivity. These are called like data mules. So we can also use these UAVs to help with connectivity, especially for added robustness. For example, if cluster heads fail, the connectivity needs to be quote unquote patched. So these UAVs can help that as well. And also, they could be dispatched on demand. For example, if an event is detected, then they can go and look more closely, so to speak, at what's happening and, take that information to the internet in a timely manner.
Yeah, that gets us into the types of sensors you're thinking about. There's a lot of options available to you. What are the pros and cons of things like, do you need a camera?
We have been thinking about even these infrared cameras, but again, the trade-off is that they're actually not just more expensive, but also more expensive in terms of their power consumption characteristics. So it's always this trade-off between being power efficient and also address the requirement of the application. So we are doing a simulation study, like a power characterization study using simulation to understand the power characteristics of the nodes and the whole network and the different types of duty cycles that we can use in order to improve the lifetime of the network and make it not more resilient, but also, last longer without having to be maintained.
Got it. Okay. That's actually really interesting. So you're kind of creating like this digital twin of the network just to see what might happen.
Exactly.
So let's talk about the compromises of doing this in a power efficient manner and how to think about like transmission of data. During wildfire season, maybe you need to send data every hour. I don't know. Versus maybe other times you can like let the network hang out and relax for a while and maybe not send data. What are your goals around power consumption and how do you think about architecting the whole solution to try to meet those power goals?
What we are thinking is that, we can have, so to speak, a default duty cycle for the network. As you mentioned, when the network is relaxed and nothing really is going on, but it's just sensing, right? But if an event is detected, for example, if there is, a combination of high temperature, low humidity, and soil moisture falls below a certain, level. So if there is this combination of conditions, then the network can go to a more alarmed duty cycle operation, and then it can sample more often. And then you can even envision another level of alarm. For example, if the camera detects some smoke, then you can see that another level of alarm in the network that it will then sample even more often so that it can send this information out in a more timely manner so that first responders can act upon that.
Okay. What are the learnings that you've taken away so far in building out this network and even modeling the network that you think might be useful to people who are trying to build their own sensor networks for monitoring? It could be a wide array of things, but building low power, resilient sensor networks.
We have this prototype that we are kind of playing with in the lab. And then we have a simulation, as you said, a dual twin that we are using to study the power consumption characteristics of the prototype. But as we deploy this in the field, I'm pretty sure, I'm positive that a lot of things are going to come up that, we haven't really anticipated. I think that weatherproofing, making sure that, it's isolated from the weather conditions and the elements is going to be very challenging. And also, for example, if we are using wind sensors and cameras, we will have to figure out where to place them while we have to place the soil moisture sensors in the ground. So there are going to be all these practical questions that will come up as we deploy these systems that will be very interesting from the engineering perspective.
And when do you anticipate this network being out and operational, if ever? Maybe it just stays a research project forever.
It's not our goal to come up with a commercial system, but what we are hoping for is that we will have this research prototype that we'll be able to deploy in a real environment. So again, our collaboration with CAL FIRE is very critical. And for example, they have recommended us to use this place called the SoCal State Forest, which is what they call a demonstration forest that CAL FIRE manages, which is very close to the UC Santa Cruz campus. So we are planning to deploy there. So we've already looked at the area, and we anticipate that with approximately 10 clusters, we will be able to cover the area there. Our target is to deploy there first and let the system run and test the system out there. But before we actually go there, we, of course, are testing it in the lab, and we will also test it in the UC Santa Cruz campus because, fortunately, we have this amazing campus and then with lots of outdoor areas that we can pretty much use to test the system still in a quote-unquote controlled environment before we actually go to the field and deploy that in the SoCal demonstration forest.
All right. Well, I feel like I've learned a lot, and I'm very excited about this project. Do you think we'll have it deployed by next fire season?
Yeah, so our goal is to deploy in the SoCal demonstration forest this coming spring. And of course, the COVID-19 problem hasn't helped because, we cannot access the lab on a regular basis. So the simulations are really helping us because we can do everything long distance. But we are hoping that we'll be able to deploy our first network of sensors this coming spring.
Awesome. Okay. Well, Katja, thanks so much for talking to us about this. I feel like we've learned a lot, and I hope it really helps.
Yes, we do so too.
That's it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, if you'd like more IoT news, sign up for my newsletter at stacyoniot.com. We'll see you next week.